All right, so we're here today, and I've been wanting to do something like this for a while, and I finally now have an excuse to do it. And the goal of this video is going to be to recap the Austin Marathon that we just ran 2 days ago. So my assumption is that most of the people that are watching this already know me. So you guys know how we got here. I'm not going to dive into that on this particular video, but I do want to kind of lay out some of the context as to why I'm doing this, what's going to be happening in the future, and just kind of how like all this came about in the first place. So the reality is, like, we do a lot of fun shit. Like, we're really fortunate. Over the past 3 years since selling True Local, I really decided to double down on finding things that I could go all in on outside of work. With True Local, you know, it was 100% of our efforts went towards building the business. And I don't think it ever could have been done a different way. I think that to make True Local successful, or anybody's first business, you have to be all in. But once you finally get that win, you can now have other aspects of your life that you give a huge percentage of yourself to. And there's been a ton of stuff, you know, everything from driving sports cars, you know, doing a bunch of races, now to running. You know, we've done awesome hikes, we've climbed mountains, we've been to events, we've done all these things. And I realized that I don't really have a huge, let's say, archive of notes that are organized in a way that I can look back on fondly and be like, oh my God, I did all these amazing, crazy things. And part of me wanting to do this video and do this stuff moving forward is that, I want to be able to look back on this stuff and just really appreciate it, because I think life moves really fast, especially when you're doing all of this type of stuff. And I feel like sometimes I just forget to just stop and appreciate, like, whoa, we just did this thing, because I'm always looking for the next thing. So that's number one. So that's helpful for me. But number two is that, you know, I've preached this stuff all the time. For anybody who knows me, you know that, you know, I'm a very much like a play hard games, win cool prizes type person. I'm very much against the idea of work-life balance. If you have these insane goals that you're going after, if you want to achieve a level of success that allows you to live a life that most people can really only dream of, you know, if you don't have to worry about money, if you get to do whatever you want, whenever you want, if you don't have to work for a boss that you hate, or you don't have to beg for an extra week vacation, you've got to put a disproportionate amount of work forward to achieve that goal. So I'm a huge believer in that. And I want to showcase this stuff because, like, I didn't come from shit. You know, I had holes in my shoes in high school. Most of the people in my life counted me out outside of my friends and my family, teachers, coaches, you know, never thought I was going to amount to anything. And somehow I turned my entire life around and was able to build a company and sell it and do all this. And I think we did it the right way. You know, my best friends are still my best friends. You know, our top like 10 employees that started the company with us were still with us when the company sold. And, I just realized that we did a lot of stuff the right way. And I think that if you guys can see my story and realize that none of this was really in the cards, at least not from anybody else's perspective, like what I believed was something different, and probably for a different conversation for another time. But I want to share this because there's no reason that anybody out there can't do this stuff. I get to have fun doing this now, but it took a lot to get here. And I think that's kind of where some of the beauty comes from, because if it was handed to me, then these videos would suck, because it would essentially mean that you wouldn't be able to do this, or it would be really inaccessible for most people. And I get that all the time. That like, well, it must be nice to be you, and, you know, wow, you're really lucky. And I think the joke is that, like, none of this stuff was handed to me. I kind of built this life, and now I get to enjoy these experiences. So my hope is that sharing this stuff, it's just interesting. I think it's interesting. And two is that it inspires you to realize that if you want to do this type of stuff, like, it's not impossible. So that's kind of the reason that these videos are coming out right now. And this one in particular is like, I just wanted to have a conversation. I realized that as we're putting out more and more content, the world is moving so fast. The amount of work that goes into making quality content really revolves around the technicalities behind putting a good viral video together, primarily around short form. So most of the time you don't really get to have that connection with the person creating the video. You don't really get to have this sort of, wow, what's this person really like? Because it's a lot of cool sound bites. You know, what makes the greatest sound bite? Why does everybody sound so good online? It's because it's all edited up. This is my chance to kind of just be me, come out here, have a conversation. My goal is to do no editing on these videos, like just run straight through. And I don't know what this is. I don't know if it's going to be a podcast. I don't know if it's going to be, you know, a video sort of vlog type thing. We're still figuring all of it out. But for now, the reality is I know this video ain't going to go viral. And the point is that most of the people watching are people who know me. So it's kind of a little intro into what's going on, and it all kind of came around the Austin Marathon. So that's the little prequel that I wanted to give you guys around all this. So diving in now for the Austin Marathon, I want to kind of go through a couple quick things here. So to give some context, I'm going to kind of rapid fire some stuff around my training. I'm going to rapid fire some stuff around the taper. I'm going to rapid fire some stuff around the Austin Marathon itself. And then I'm going to go into my experience of the Austin Marathon. Reason being, I see videos like this all the time. And yeah, I love hearing about how the race is, or I love hearing about, you know, the gear, or I love hearing about the training, but it's always kind of just sprinkled in and not really sort of raffled off in a way that I can kind of take notes. So I wanted to give you guys that first. So essentially, quick facts around the training. I just finished what I called my third training block. Now, these aren't real training blocks, okay? I know when most people do training blocks, they are doing something like a 12 to 16 week, 3 month, 6 month training block. I pretty much just call my training blocks anytime I'm taking my training seriously. So I'm not doing these like super professional official training blocks. It's just like, okay, I've got 6 weeks until my next event. I'm now taking training seriously, and I call it a block. So to give you an idea, my first training block, which started, I think, in September, was like 6 or 9 weeks. And then my second training block, which was in December, was essentially 5 weeks. And then this training block that I did for the Austin Marathon was 4 weeks. So these aren't like your super regimented, you know, training blocks in terms of length. But I am learning a lot each time, and I'm gearing up to hopefully put together an official, like full on training block. That's about 12 weeks to get me ready for Austin. So that's, or sorry, not Austin, to get me ready for Boston. So that's kind of what we're working towards there. But for this one, it was 4 weeks coming off the Disney marathons. I did the Disney Dopey Challenge, which is sick. Like, I highly recommend anybody, if you enjoy running and you just like cool experiences. Disney hosts what they call the Dopey Challenge. So their marathon weekend is the 5K. They host a 5K race, a 10K race, a half marathon, and the full marathon. So of course you can sign up for any of those individually, but you can also choose to do all of them, and they call it the Dopey Challenge, and it's just an unreal experience. They did it, I heard like one of the greatest sayings around the Dopey Challenge, which was, if you're setting PRs during the Dopey Challenge, you're doing it wrong. It's definitely not one of those things that you go there and just try to absolutely demolish, and, you know, try to prove something to yourself on that one. It's more of a fun one, and really just kind of like more of like a volume test. You know, you're not necessarily going to go and PR the marathon after running a 5K, 10K and a half, but the experience is amazing, and I'll do something about that later on. But anyway, that was my second training block. So my fourth training block, or sorry, my third training block, which started as soon as we got here to Austin, was 4 weeks plus a taper, and the taper was 1 week. So the way it looked was that I was doing about 5 runs per week, usually in the mornings. So I wake up in the morning, do a run, and that included 2 threshold workouts. Now, I'm not following like a specific training methodology. I know there's the Norwegian style that talk about double threshold days and talk about your threshold limits, and there's 2. You know, you've got the 2 different thresholds, and then there's other people who work through a zone 2. There's other people who do, you know, the Maffetone method. There's all these different methods, and I don't know enough about it to say that I'm following one in particular. I'm kind of just picking up little bits and pieces and nuggets of info that I'm incorporating into my training. And, you know, shout out to all the podcasts out there that, you know, essentially you don't really need to spend a whole lot of time doing crazy research anymore. You can just watch a few YouTube videos and listen to a few podcasts, and you already know more than people who've gone to school for this stuff. So shout out, you know, Andrew Huberman, Andy Galpin, you know, a bunch of the podcasts that I've just listened to that have helped me a lot in just piecing together my own program. So 5 runs per week, 2 threshold ones, which essentially just means I'm doing 2 intense workouts. I do that on Wednesdays and on Sundays. And on Wednesdays, I just try to PR a 10K. So on Wednesdays, I go out there and I'm like, okay, this week, I'm just going to run 10K as fast as I can. So pretty much I'm just getting my heart going. You know, we're at the red limit the entire way through, and that's what I do on Wednesdays. And then on Sundays, I have a long run that I'm also trying to push myself. So I wouldn't say necessarily it's a PR every time. I'm bouncing between doing 21 kilometers or 30 kilometers, but same concept. Like, I'm really trying to push it. Maybe not a max effort every time, but I'm just trying to get my heart pumping and get a real workout in. The other 3 runs are just pure recovery runs. So really, you know, what some people would call that zone 2 area. But I'm just trying to get my heart rate under 149 beats per minute. That's kind of based on the Maffetone method, which is just run under that limit. I think it's something like 220 minus your age. That's kind of like your max aerobic heart rate. So essentially, that training, when you're training under 149 beats per minute, you're really maximizing how well and efficient your body uses oxygen. And the thing about that, it was like a complete and total eye-opener for me, because the thing about that was that before I started actually taking running seriously in October, I would just do every run as hard as I could. I thought if I did every run as hard as I can, then that's how I'm going to get better. But the problem is I didn't understand that you use different energy systems in combination when you're doing a marathon. So yes, you are using your aerobic system, which is how well your body can use oxygen, but you're also using your anaerobic system, and that's essentially your body's ability to produce energy without using oxygen. They have to work together, and working in that zone 2 sub 149 beats per minute is what's going to help that aerobic system. So that's where the recovery runs come in. Plus, it's just good to loosen out your body. So that's how I've been doing this. I've been stacking this with a strength program. The reason I did that is because I'm more of a gym person than I am a runner, and I always have been. So I figured that's going to be an advantage for me. I know that a lot of people who get serious about running feel as though that they don't need to do any strength training, or they are allergic to the gym. For me, it's a couple things. If I'm being honest, I just don't love the runner's body. Like, I don't really have an interest in trying to lose as much weight as possible. So that was one reason. And number 2 is the fact that I actually really believe that to become a good runner isn't about dropping weight or, just getting as skinny as possible. I think it's actually about maintaining a pretty impressive amount of muscle so that your body can handle the absolute abuse that is marathon training. Having a good base of muscle and having a strong body and sort of bulletproofing your joints and your tendons and your ligaments through strength training, to me, is kind of like the secret cheat code that someone like me, who doesn't have like your typical runner's body, can use to actually try to compete and have a bit of a competitive advantage. So I like to keep my strength going in my training blocks. So in this training block, it was 5 runs per week, and then it was alternating gym days. So essentially, I would do a chest split, I would do back, I would do shoulders, and I would do legs, each on individual days, rotating through the week. So 5 runs per week, that's about 61 kilometers per week that I was doing. So 10Ks, 4 10Ks, and then a 30K or a 21K. Recovery became really serious for me. In my first training block is the first time I ever did yoga. That was game changing. I now do sauna like about 3 times a week. And luckily I got to the spot in Austin called The Collective, awesome place. And they have a cold plunge, which I absolutely despise with a passion. But it works. So I know a lot of people love to talk about the mental benefits, and they love to talk about just how good it is for your clarity and your peace of mind. And they talk about your instant dopamine and all this type of stuff. I get it. I hear it. I'm not experiencing any of it. The only reason I get in there is because it makes my muscles hurt less. So I started adding that in there. And then I'm also now doing, I got my nutrition fairly dialed in. So for this block, we're at 2,500 calories, give or take. You know, it's not an exact science. It's more of an art. But plus or minus, 2,400 to 2,600 calories. It works for me. All right. I know a ton of people who are like, oh my God, that's either a lot or either that's not enough. And I never really understood why I watch a lot of videos and nobody really says their calories. Like, they'll do an entire video where they're like, this is what I eat in a day, and not really say what the calorie count is. Or they're kind of like, cagey with it. I don't know. Maybe that's like something you're not supposed to share. But for me, I'm doing 2,500 give or take. So that'll change a little bit on the weekends when I'm getting ready for my long run. Maybe I'll take an extra, few hundred calories here or there. But I noticed that, just to be clear, I'm putting on size. So from training block 1, training block 2, and training block 3, I've consistently put on lean muscle mass. So it's working for me. I dial it every block. I look to see, did I lose weight? Did I gain weight? And I just pretty much adjust accordingly for the next block. So supplements, pretty straightforward. Protein, BCAAs, glutamine for recovery. I just started taking creatine for this block. Magnesium threonate in the form, I just take it in my coffee. Vitamin D and K2. I take electrolytes and I take veggie greens. So it's nothing super crazy. That's all I'm taking right now. And that's pretty much like a quick fact on the training block. So from there, getting ready for the Austin Marathon, I had 4 weeks to train, and I had a 5 day, week 5 was for a taper. And the way I looked at my taper was I essentially just did 7 days. So I did my last hard workout on the Sunday prior to the marathon Sunday. So 7 days before the marathon, I did my last hard training session, which was it was a 30K PR effort. So I did that, went super well, felt sore after. I incorporated a couple hills actually, which was good because I still was able to get a PR on it, even though there was some elevation. I did that because I found out fairly last minute that Austin has a ton of rolling hills. So I wanted to kind of put something in there. But that was my last major workout before starting to taper. So what I did for the taper is essentially I cut my runs down from 5 to 3. So instead of doing 5 runs in the week, I did 3 runs. So essentially what I did the Sunday, I did that big workout. Monday, I took off from any running. Tuesday, I took off from any running. Tuesday I ran. Wednesday I took off, which is my usual intense session. Thursday I ran, and then Friday I also ran, and I cut the kilometers in half too, so I only did 5Ks. And really it was just to try to get my body loosened up and just kind of not seize up. The taper's a weird time because you kind of feel like shit the whole time because you're so used to a certain level of intensity. And when you're not doing it, you just feel like every day that goes by, you're getting worse and worse. But the reality is you're actually getting better and better. But trust me, I feel anybody who struggles with the going taper crazy, where you just feel like you're getting worse. Now, the one thing I will say about my taper is that I probably would add an extra 1 or 2 days. And the reason being is because still by like Wednesday, Thursday, I felt super heavy. I still felt like I was in the middle of training. My legs were super heavy. I still had all of that fatigue that I was carrying from the training block. And the whole point of the taper is that you reduce your load so that you can kind of shake off some of that accrued fatigue that you've gotten over your training block. Wednesday, Thursday, I was starting to get a little nervous because I still felt really heavy. But I had this assumption that I bet it'll come quick. Like, I bet what'll happen is that once I start to get into that recovery mode and shake off the fatigue, like my body's going to be expecting another intense workout, let's say on Thursday, Friday. When that workout doesn't come, I bet my body will start to relax a little bit and start to focus a little bit more on recovery. I don't know if this is a fact, by the way. I'm not a scientist, but this is just what I was feeling. And it did actually happen, but it happened on Saturday. So Friday, I started feeling a little bit better. And Saturday, I really started to get my bounce in my step where I started feeling like, oh my God, like this is what the taper is supposed to feel like. So it happens quick. And I think that makes sense because the reality is I pretty much didn't change anything until Tuesday. Sunday, I had my normal workout. I don't run on the Monday. I went to the gym on Monday and just reduced the weight to like 50%. And then Tuesday is the time when I actually started cutting things back. So really, I would probably just add 1 more day to my taper. But either way, it ended up feeling good. I added an extra 500 calories per day throughout that week in the form of carbs. And I think that was a little much. I'm pretty in tune with my body and I felt a little heavy. And once again, I know these like calories don't sound like much, but when you're fairly dialed in, like you notice it a lot. So the marathon went really well. So I can't really complain, but I want to take a better look at the calories during my taper. I was doing 3 liters of water, 2 packets of the magnesium threonate, and a pack of electrolytes throughout the taper as well, because I really wanted to avoid cramping. When I first started doing my marathons, that was the biggest issue, was that I was getting these absolutely brutal cramps. So I like over prepare to avoid cramps. So I wanted to make sure I had more than enough water. I like the magnesium, and the electrolytes are LMNT, so it's essentially 1,000 milligrams of sodium. So that worked really well. And then the day before the marathon, I jumped up to 330 calories, and that ended up looking like 404 grams of carbs, 135 grams of fat, 126 grams of protein. It just felt like what I wanted to do. I didn't really have any specific guidelines to go off of. I was just like, I can eat pretty freely, and I probably should get more carbs in. So that ended up working pretty well. So those are some quick facts about the taper. I just wanted to give as much information as possible because, once again, I didn't know what any of this stuff was in October of last year, and it would have helped me a lot if I did. But those are some facts around my training block that got me to here, and some facts about the taper. So now moving into the Austin Marathon itself, super interesting marathon. So like I've said a couple times, I had no idea that this marathon was as rolly as it was. I didn't know that there was elevation. I didn't know that there was a ton of hills. And it wasn't until a buddy messaged me a little bit before being like, hey, have you added any elevation into your workouts? So pretty much my goal was 320, 3 hours and 20 minutes for the marathon, which was down from 327, which is my previous PR on a flat course. The Austin Marathon is, here's some quick facts for you. So the Austin Marathon is the 20th largest marathon in the USA. And I got this description of the course online. So the Austin Marathon is a rolling loop course with several long straightaways and approximately 28 turns. The marathon course gains approximately 14 feet per mile over the first 17 miles before dropping over 33 feet per mile over the final 9 miles. Or, for my Canadian friends, 2.65 meters per kilometer over the first 27 kilometers. So it's going up 2.65 meters per kilometer over the first 27 kilometers before dropping over 6.25 meters per kilometer over the final 14 kilometers, where you finish on Congress Avenue in the shadow of the state capitol building. So it's pretty iconic. You're pretty much running up and down the main areas of Austin, the downtown area. According to Find My Marathon, which has become like my favorite website, it ranks the Austin Marathon. So pretty much what Find My Marathon does is it's this website that you can go to where you can put in your marathon time for a specific marathon that you've run, and it'll compare it to other courses to give you an idea if it's a faster or a slower course. So essentially, when you go to Find My Marathon, out of 494 courses, the Austin Marathon is 399th slowest. So what I will tell you is if you're trying to do a PR, this one is not the one to try it at. Unless you want to incorporate, a more difficult marathon so that hopefully then your training later on gets a little easier, which kind of ended up working out. So maybe do give that a shot if you are trying to do it that way. But if you are trying to like qualify for something, or if this marathon is a big sort of, or any marathon that you're trying to do is like really, you want to nail this PR and you're at the limit, this one is going to be a very hard course. So something to keep in mind. The vibe of the Austin Marathon was sick. Like it was a great marathon. I think marathons in general, people don't really realize or appreciate how amazing they are from the perspective of just going, and whether you're there and you're in the corrals and you're just looking around and seeing people of all shapes and sizes, knowing that for some people they're doing this for fun, for some people they're racing it, for some people it's them against them, they're fighting their internal demons, they want to just be better, and then other people you see that this is like a life-changing moment. Like this is something that they never thought they could do, that they are trying to, and that this is a moment in time for them. Like you see all of that at the marathon. You see the 80-year-old granny who passes you on kilometer 26 of your first marathon being like, holy shit, like that's what I want to be when I'm older. And then you see the kid who's just old enough to enter, just trying it for the first time. It's a really cool experience, and the Austin Marathon in general really embodies a lot of what Austin is. We've been preaching Austin for I don't know how long now, but the people are absolutely amazing. Some of the cool stuff about the Austin Marathon in terms of the people is that it narrows a lot. Like there are a lot of times when you are running in the street, but they've brought it in so that you're like 3 people stretching their arms like this across, like in terms of width, and people are just cheering you on, getting after it. And I will say I've seen some of the funniest signs at the Austin Marathon. So I'm assuming it's UT graduates or UT kids, but there's some good ones. One of my favorite was, if marathons were easy, they'd be called your mom. So some good humor out there. Another cool thing too was the live music all the way. So a lot of music, you know, Austin's obviously known for its music. So it was cool to see, you know, every few mile markers or kilometer markers, you would get some live music, everything from jazz, piano, techno. It was a cool vibe. So the other thing too, actually I forgot, Erms, do you mind grabbing my bag? Because I've got my medal in there. Sweet. Okay, so one thing that is awesome is the Austin Marathon medal. So what I will say is that this is hands down probably the sickest medal that we've gotten so far. So pretty much you've got this awesome brown sort of like just caramel chocolate color, and it is a belt buckle. So pretty much if you wanted to wear this around your belt and just kind of go flex on people, you could, but this is an awesome medal. So huge shout out. I've said this a million times before. I'm a sucker for hardware. People say that, you know, if you care about your little trophies, then there's something wrong with you, but I don't give a shit. I want my medals. I love my medals. And this is hands down the nicest medal outside of the Disney marathons. The Austin Marathon medal so far is the nicest medal that we've gotten. So if you like your medals, definitely worth doing. So that's some quick facts about Austin. In terms of my experience running the marathon, very interesting. I did get the PR. So at the end of the day, I finished with a 3 hour and 18 minute and 55 second finishing time. That was my bib time, so like my actual time, and that translates to a 7 minute and 36 second per mile, or a 4 minute and 43 second per kilometer pace. So honestly, I feel real good. Like I'm super happy about that. That came down quite a bit from my last marathon. And really we were only talking about, you know, give or take 4 weeks of training. So feeling good about that. The way the day started was, I woke up at 4 a.m. I love being up about 3 hours before the marathon. For a few reasons. Number one, I want to be done eating 2 hours before the marathon, like completely finished. So we woke up at 4 a.m. for the 7 a.m. start time. It was also nice because we were staying right across from the starting line. Essentially, our place was a literal 5-minute walk. The race starts at the South Congress Bridge. So we didn't have to worry about parking. We didn't have to worry about leaving early. So it really made it that it was a pretty seamless experience. Woke up, and I did 860 calories from these square things that I make. And honestly, people laugh at me, but if anybody knows me, you know that I have the palate of like a 15-year-old. So pretty much it's oatmeal, it is sea salt, it is cinnamon, it is coconut oil, it is honey, it is chocolate chips and pumpkin seeds. And I just snack on that. That's like my junk food essentially that I just eat. Tons of carbs, so it seems like it makes sense. Gets me about 860 calories for my meal. I don't do bagels, I don't do bananas, I don't do any of that. Not because I know better, not because I have any sort of scientific indication as to why I should be eating this. This is just what I eat. It's been working for me. So essentially, I'm done eating by 5, and I start sipping my coffee at 4:15. Reason being is because I want to be done my coffee before 5 as well, and I put my magnesium in the coffee. So the magnesium threonate, I take 2 packages of it on marathon day, dump it in the coffee, and then just pretty much chug that down before 5 a.m. Because at 5 a.m., so 2 hours before the marathon, I start sipping my water. Now, for my water, I'm doing 14 ounces. I'll talk about this a little later, but what I care about more now, I think I've toned in the whole cramping issue. In terms of electrolytes and hydration, I feel pretty good. It could get better, but I'll go over that a little bit more. But I've come down from sipping on 18 ounces of water 2 hours before the race to 16 ounces of water to 14 ounces of water. And I'll talk about why in a little bit. But just so you know, at 5 a.m., I'm taking 14 ounces of water, 2,000 milligrams of electrolytes. Shout out Andrew Kim. I was pretty much taking 500 milligrams of electrolytes before, and then I was getting these major cramping issues, so I upped it, and then eventually he told me, he's like, dude, you're way off, like get more electrolytes in. So far I'm feeling good. It's 2,000 milligrams of electrolytes, and then I take a scoop of BCAAs. I just like it. Makes me feel good. So that is how the morning started. Then essentially we walked from our apartment at, I don't even know, maybe 6:30, maybe like even, yeah, I think it was actually 6:30. So like right before the marathon started. It took us 5 minutes to get out there. It was freezing cold by Texas standards, maybe not by Canadian standards, but it was freezing cold by Texas standards. So we were at the start line by 6:35. We thought we were going to be late, and it was freezing. So we just dipped into a hotel and hung out there. So once again, shout out to Austin, because this would never fly in Canada at all. But they pretty much just let everybody hang out in the lobby. Washrooms are packed. So that was interesting. And it was just like 100 runners just cramming the lobby of this hotel. So the nice thing is, if you get to the Austin Marathon early, you don't have to worry about being stuck outside. So that was cool. You guys know me, I'm a huge Tesla fan, huge Elon Musk fan. So of course it's awesome to see that the pace vehicle was the Cybertruck, which I've seen like 4 of so far since being in Austin. And I swear that if you do not like the Cybertruck, you're just a hater. Like, it is sick. So Cybertruck decked out in Austin decals. So that was cool. And then pretty much we walked out literally 10 minutes before the marathon started. There was no corrals. You pretty much just went out there, and there was kind of like your little pace bunnies that would have the times that you were trying to do, and you would just go ahead and get started, and that was it. Austin, one of the beautiful things about Austin is that like all the movers and shakers are here, or at least a lot of movers and shakers are here. So, you know, at the starting line, you're seeing all these sort of big names. You know, Nick Bear did the announcement to kick off the actual marathon. You know, Matt Choi's out there doing his thing. You know, there was so many people that are just kind of living large and being these huge personalities and being an inspiration, to be honest, to a lot of people. So it was kind of cool to see all of them in that one spot. And then pretty much the race started. So they kicked it off. You get your, they had kind of like the fireworks on top of the Austin sign, which is pretty cool. And the first 5K is like donkey kick to the face, like welcome to the Austin Marathon, which is pretty much the tail of the take. The hills on this marathon are insane. The first 5K is straight uphill. All right. So for anybody who is doing training for the Austin Marathon, just get used to doing the elevation. The thing that I find the most with hills isn't that they're that much harder. It's that because you're activating different muscles, you get this risk of cramping. It's not usually an issue in the early half of a marathon, but in the later half, it doesn't matter how big the hill is. Just having that slight forward lean, I find, can really trigger some cramps. So just something to keep in mind. So as the race started, was feeling good. You know, I was just going out there. I knew that my splits and the initial 5K was going to be a little bit slower just because it was all uphill. But of course, to make matters worse, I wanted to take my GoPro just to catch some footage before the race. And then I was going to give it to Irma. And then the race starts. And I'm like, wow, do my shorts feel heavier than usual? And the GoPro was stuck in my pocket. So that was interesting. So I had that in my pocket the whole way, ended up making it work. It was no problem, and got to the top of the hill. So you're running up about 5K straight uphill. And essentially what ends up happening is, you know, what goes up must come down. So you do the 5K uphill, you do a hard right, you come back down, and then you're running 5K downhill. Now, I've never really done any downhill training. I know that a lot of people say that they have quad issues on the way down. Fortunately, throughout all my training, my main injury issues have been my Achilles tendon, which I think is an Achilles tendinopathy, not a tendonitis. I've had some pain on my inside ankle, on my inside of my left ankle, which I think is because my tibialis, so like the muscle on the front, like you kind of like the muscles near your shins were really tight. And it kind of alternates from foot to foot. I've been lucky. I haven't had any knee pain. I haven't had any hip pain, and I haven't had any quad pain. Now, actually, I should rephrase that. I haven't had any hip injuries, knee injuries, or quad injuries. And the way that I look at my injuries is that I kind of have this sliding scale. I have this scale of soreness, and then that scale has like a minor all the way to a major. So minor sore, major sore, and then the major sore leaks into the injury scale, which is essentially a minor injury or a major injury. And before I started actually training, I'm probably like most people, where a lot of the times I would blow right past the soreness, the major soreness, like high level soreness, and blow right into low level or mid level injury and just keep going, which of course then just translates into high level injury. Now for all my training blocks, I'm super sensitive to this. I will not do anything past going from major soreness into minor injury. If I'm at major soreness, I'm already starting to back something off. I don't even want to get to the minor injury stage. So the thought process there is just that it's going to take a lot of training to get to Boston. This isn't something that's inevitable. It's not something I'm worried about being able to do. It's just something that I have to be able to survive the training to make it happen. If I can just keep at this long enough, I'm obviously going to get there. So I just need to look at this from the perspective of, I guess, I can't really leave that door open. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So essentially my whole focus is really not even going into the injury category. Now I have slipped in there, but I immediately am starting to address it and try to take it down. So I haven't had any injuries across quads, hips, or knees. However, they do sometimes get sore, and they haven't even gotten into major soreness, which I'm lucky. But for the first time ever, these downhills, like you're doing almost another 5 kilometers of downhill, I absolutely started feeling it in my quads. And I don't even know what the muscle's called. I'm going to figure it out and start researching it. But man, like my outside left ass muscle, whatever that is insanely stiff and insanely sore. And that actually ended up being sort of the tail of the tape for this entire marathon. So every time I do a run or every time I do a marathon, I kind of think of my most problem area on that run. And it's not to say that it's even on the scale of sore or injury. It's just what was the thing that I noticed the most. And coming off of this run, it was that left outside glute, just like burning. It was burning. It was tight. It was super sensitive. It was sore. And I got to think it was because of the elevation. So I'm going to look into it a little bit more, but that's what I noticed the most. And then my quads was the close second. Now, my quads didn't really get past like major soreness. It was just major soreness, and that's totally fine with me. So that was that sort of 5K down. Was the introduction. 5K up was introduction to the elevation. 5K down was introduction to the downhill. And of course, I was wearing an Apple Watch, and at the 8K mark, I noticed that it wasn't screaming splits to me anymore. And I looked down, and the thing is like dead. It's just no longer recording. It's off. It's not working. So as you all know, as a guy who loves his trophies, I also love my stats. So at this point, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I'm pretty much running blind. I go ahead. I don't like to put my phone out too much when I'm running, especially when you're doing a PR effort, right? Like anybody who's done this before knows that if you're running a casual marathon and you're just doing a casual race, anything, a 5K, a 10K, it's easy to reach in your pocket, grab your phone, and take some recordings or check your music or switch your Strava, whatever. But when you're trying to do a max effort, it does take from you to actually go and do that. So I was like, okay, well, I'd want to try to at least have some sort of stats. So I just started my Strava kind of blindly wherever I was. I think I was at the 8K mark, and I started having to use that. So I didn't have any splits. I didn't really know what pace I was running. I didn't really know where I was at. So started trying to do some quick math in my head. Not my strong suit. And I just pretty much essentially gave up on trying to track where I was. I just knew that eventually I was going to pass the half marathon point. And when I pass the half marathon point, I'll check my, phone and see, okay, where am I at the half marathon, and start working backwards from there. Yeah. The obvious, statement goes, there are mile markers, but as a Canadian, I don't do the conversion in my head yet. I think that the more I get into running, the more I will. But right now I couldn't tell you what an 8-minute per mile pace is in kilometers. And I can't tell you what kilometer 13 means other than it's the halfway mark for the marathon. So there was a couple kilometer markers, like I think 35 and I think another one. So I kind of had an idea that way, but long story short, I'm done with Apple Watch. I get a lot of dumb things sometimes just because I think it's going to help. And the one thing, for whatever reason, I was holding out on for a long time was getting a Garmin. I was like, I don't know what it's going to do that my Apple Watch won't do. And to be honest, like between, the fitness app and between Strava, I don't really know what I need extra for, but I am at the point now where I just need the reliability. And we do a lot of hikes, and I've got a couple ultras coming up. So I think the Garmin, not only from just a running perspective and being able to structure my workouts, will be helpful, but I'll just be able to rely on it a lot more. So we're going to switch over to a Garmin at some point. I don't know which one yet. I got to watch a bunch of YouTube videos and figure it out. But my watch crapped out on me, and that was that. So going through the run, that was about the 8K mark. At the halfway point, I always, this huge analogy for life that you always face the final boss battle before you get to everything you want. Well, for the half marathon and for the full marathon, that was the case. there is a monster of a hill right before the half marathon finish mark. And like, it's one of those ones that you just see it off in the distance and you're just like, oh, this is going to be the worst. You start coming up to it, you're coming down this downhill, and then you just get this huge, long, giant up ramp that you have to run up. This is also a hilarious point because I had somebody send me a message. Obviously I follow Nick Bear. Actually I'd be lying if I said that he wasn't the one of the people that, I was able to learn some of the most about running from, through his YouTube videos. So, of course, there was a point where I saw him in his hat, like way ahead, but I didn't realize that he had passed me. And it wasn't until somebody sent me a message on Instagram, like, yo, you're in Nick Bear's video. And apparently there's just this video of Nick and he was running with someone and just like crushing it up this hill, just like no problem, like yelling out everything. And as they're filming, they pass this dude who's just like gassed on the hill trying to get up this hill, and that was me. So that's kind of funny. That's the moment. That's the hill right before the half marathon. It's a nightmare. But one of the things you got to get through. So going past that, the second half of the marathon is, I would say, a lot easier up until the final kilometer. So you've done most of your elevation in the first half. You are now pretty much just kind of coasting and going mostly downhill. But like any marathon, I think the craziest thing just to realize is that, someone told me this once, but it's so true. The race doesn't start till kilometer 30 and your marathon doesn't start till kilometer 35. And I used to think, I didn't really know what that meant. Like I didn't really have a full understanding of that. I always looked at it as like, hey, I just did 10K. Okay, now I'm at the halfway mark. Okay, now I just got to redo a half marathon. Or, when you get to the 30 kilometer mark, you're like, okay, just 10 more to go. But the reality is that that's not the case at all, because kilometer 31 is not, oh, I just have 10 more or 12 more kilometers to go. No. Kilometer 31 is not kilometer 1 of the 12 you have left. Kilometer 31 is its own beast, just like kilometer 32 and kilometer 33. Those kilometers are very different than just a random, oh, I've got 10K or 12K left. I find what you realize is that you get to the 30 kilometer mark and usually you're kind of feeling okay. And in your head, you're just playing little games with yourself, right? You're trying to work backwards from, okay, I've only got a few more to go. So you tell yourself, oh, it's only 10 more to go. And then what ends up happening is at the 32 kilometer mark, you realize, okay, well now technically I only have 10 more to go. And then you start to realize where it starts to hurt. And you start to realize where those 2 kilometers were not the same as any other 2 kilometers. And then at kilometer 35, you start to realize, oh my God, like I'm hurting. This 10 kilometer, 12 kilometer, whatever it was between kilometer 30 and 35 was not what I expected 5 kilometers to be like. And that's where you start to see people absolutely blow up. And I had this experience at the Vancouver Marathon where I was getting these ridiculous cramps at kilometer 35, and at kilometer 30, I felt like $1,000. I said 1,000, not a million, for a reason. Like I felt good, but I wasn't, at full steam. And on this one in particular, I don't know why, but I watched so many people blow up at the 35 kilometer mark. And if you've done a marathon or any long race before, you know what that looks like. And I think it's the scariest thing, and it's hard to explain to someone who hasn't done these long distance runs, but you might feel like you have more in the tank, and you might very well have extra to give. The problem, though, isn't that you're trying to conserve your endurance or your fitness, at least in my experience. My issue is that I don't want to push it a little bit more because I feel like I'm right on the edge for a cramp. I feel like I'm like, oh, if I take one step wrong, or I decelerate too much, or I accelerate, or my angle turns because I'm going up or downhill, that might be the one trigger that makes me get a cramp that just takes me out for either the rest of the race or at least a minute or two. And that's my biggest fear. So that kilometer 35 is just always a reminder of, at any point in time, whether you have 10 kilometers left, 12 kilometers left, or 1 kilometer left, like your race can be over really quick. And I watched it happen a lot. These people that we were running with the whole way through, they looked great, and then out of nowhere, bang. It's literally like a sniper just took that shot. The memes that are out there, it's like boom, and the person just, you see their hamstrings just cramp up. So that's something that here, I don't know why in particular, well, probably because of the rolling hills and everything, but I saw it happen to a lot of people. So the last kilometer of this race is a metaphor for life. I say this all the time. I'm a huge believer that you face your final boss battle right before you get to everything you've ever wanted. So it's only fitting that the most difficult portion of the race would be the last 500 meters before you reach the finish line. And I knew that there was this big incline and this elevation before the finish line, but we kept getting so close to the finish line and it never kept showing up that I was like, oh, maybe we were going uphill and I didn't realize the whole time. I remember hitting the 40-kilometer mark and being like, wow, like I feel totally fine. Yeah, it's because it's the last like 500 meters or so. You turn around this corner and there's just this huge honking hill in front of you. It's not the longest hill that you're going to do, but it's got to be one of the steepest. So you are just muscling up this hill and then you got to go straight back down, which once again, you know, you feel really good because you can feel the energy. You're near the finish line. People are cheering you on. People are running into the streets to kind of run with you and get this going. So you can sense that you're close. You know that you're close and you just got to get past this main hill. And then by the time you're going down at next hill, you're kind of like just giving it everything you got. So anyway, that was the final boss battle of the Austin Marathon. Now, here's the crazy thing about the Austin Marathon, at least from my experience, was that I always play these little mini games when I do these marathons just to try to get me through, right? I always say people think that I do marathons for my physical fitness. That's not the case. I do it for the mental fitness. I think the physical fitness is a byproduct of training for marathons, but really at the end of the day, it's a mental game. Not only is it the mental discipline to endure the training, just the relentless, monotonous day after day after day of doing the same thing, getting incrementally better, sometimes getting incrementally worse, but then over the long period of time, you see the results. That is the same expression of what happens during the marathon itself, where it's just step after step after step. So it's kind of like, how do you make time go by fast? So I got these little mini games that I play for marathons, which, like, number one is I try not to turn on my music for as long as I can. So for me, it's like the music is a gift. You know, I absolutely believe that music is a drug. You know, I think when you put a song on and, you know, the hair in the back of your neck stands up and you just get this extra burst of energy, you can't tell me that playing a song doesn't give you an extra little juice. So for me, I like to save that. And in a marathon, you can. I find when you're doing training runs, obviously you want to have something playing, but in a marathon, there's so much energy that you could go through the first 10K and not even realize you're running a marathon. And I like to do that and try to maximize that as long as I can. So how long can I go before I even turn my music on? Because once you turn your music on, now you got a whole other, you know, advantage that you're using. You've got a whole other the superpower that you can use. So I like to play the mini game of how long can I go before turning on my music. The next game is the one that everybody plays, I think. The idea of, okay, I've only got to do, you know, I'm at the 10K point. I've only got 3 more 10Ks to go. I've only got, you know, 5 more 1Ks to go, whatever it is. I'll play that game sometimes. That one will catch you, though, at the 30-kilometer mark. Another one that I love to do, and this is just something I like to do for myself, it's the zombie apocalypse. You know, I love this idea of, okay, take the fun out of this. So let's take away the organization. Let's take away the fact that this is self-imposed and organized and safe. And let's say that there is some sort of like world crisis, like a zombie apocalypse. They're coming behind you. They're like 30 kilometers away. And you have no choice but to get to the safe house, which is 42 kilometers away. There's 4,000 other people with you. Not all of you are going to make it. Go. I like to play that game sometimes. The last one, though, and anybody who knows me will probably have seen this coming, and you've probably heard the story from other people much more prominent than myself that also do this, but I love to choose an enemy. Like, I love to have someone to compete with, even if I don't know that person. Probably the best person in the world. Just great dude, great gal, whatever. But if I see someone running at a similar pace, I'll kind of pick that person and be like, hey, it's you and me. And I kind of try to make it my mission to either keep up with this person or beat this person. There's not really any competition going on, so it doesn't work every time. But it definitely keeps me going for a while, especially if they pass me early on. Then I can kind of look and be like, okay, let's see if what kilometer 30 looks like for you. Let's see what your mentality is around kilometer 30. So I do that one all the time. And this was the first time ever that I had a dude that was running around me the entire time almost. We were kind of, elastic banding. He would get a little bit ahead of me. I never passed him the entire race, but he was always just a little bit ahead of me. But sometimes I would close the gap. He'd be a little bit ahead of me. And what I did realize, though, is that as I would get closer to him, he definitely had the same mentality. Because if I got closer to him and my pace was a little bit faster, he'd pick it up every time. And my whole thing is I want to try to run my own race to a certain extent, where if I'm going to try to make a move, I'm going to do it at the end. But I don't want to blow up early on. But I did notice if ever I was feeling good and I would pick up the pace, he would pick it up as well. So I'm like, okay, cool. All right. This makes it even better. Like, I see what you're doing. We're doing the same thing. So we're about 2 kilometers from the finish line. He's hurting. I'm hurting. I can see it. And at 2 kilometers, I started getting close to him again, and he pulled away like quite a bit. So I was like, okay, like this guy's got it. But when that hill came around, he slowed up quite a bit. So I started catching up to him. And I don't know if this is from my sports car racing, but like, I like making the last move. Like, I would much rather size it up, be like, okay, this is how he's moving. This is where he's going. I'm going to make a final dash whenever I can and try to do it that way. And that's how I was going to like have my own little internal medal. Anyway, we go, he's ahead of me on the hill. We get close on the hill. Downhill, he picks up speed. I pick up speed. The last 100 meters or so, I'm feeling real good. He's probably, I don't even know. I couldn't even tell you how far away. He's not that far away. But I just am like, okay, good. There's the finish line. I start sprinting. And I'm like, this is great. Boom, I'm going to blow by this guy. And I go full speed and blow by this dude. Okay. And I'm striding. I'm like, I got this. This is no problem. And I've got to be like 10 steps away from the finish line. And all I see in my peripheral is this dude's pink shoes. And this dude immediately, as I passed him, started sprinting beside me as well. And we literally crossed the finish line at the exact same time. And as a competitive dude, like, I love having my finish line. Like, I want to have my finish line. I want to go there. I want that photo finish. I love it. It's a memory. It's a moment in time of an accomplishment. And this is the first time ever I could not help but just burst out laughing. Me and this guy looked at each other and we both just died at the finish line because we knew exactly what we were doing throughout this run. We knew that we were both gassing each other up. We both had the same mentality. Neither of us wanted to lose. And I got to give this guy all the credit in the world because this is a 44-year-old man that I was trying to race with here. So we both finished at 3 hours and 18 minutes. And it was just one of those things that, like, in the racing community, in the marathon racing community, it's just another example of gassing each other up, man. The competition is so healthy. It's so good. We both had the same thing in mind, and it was just this great experience. Anyway, the guy's name was Emil. We didn't get any contact info, but it was just an awesome experience. So anyway, that was the Austin Marathon. Absolutely fantastic event. I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited about how the training went. In terms of nutrition for the marathon itself, I did 7 goos plus 1. So I brought the extra one just in case. I'm overly paranoid about cramping. I'm overly paranoid about that. So I brought an extra one. And then I brought 250 grams sodium, so salt tabs. And I think I had like those on every alternating one. So I didn't cramp, but I did feel kind of close. So I got to work on dialing that in a little bit more. But that was the Austin Marathon, and honestly, it was a great experience, and, you know, I'm happy to be able to share it, and I'm excited to do it again next year for sure. I think it really did a good job of kind of capping off a training block for me. From an injury perspective, after the race, I really didn't have any injuries. The main thing was that left glute that was just really sore. My Achilles was fine, which is insane, considering how much of a problem it was in my first training block. My tibialis were fine. Yeah, that was pretty much it. So huge shout out to just everybody who's helped me. Actually, I got to give some shout outs. So Nat from True Health, no relation to True Local, crazy story though. You know, I really feel like you got my Achilles getting going for me, trying to work on that tendinopathy and get some strength going there. You know, Sarah Mariano, of course, for helping me with my tibs, making sure that they stay loose. And then Mark St. Pierre, so I work with. So actually, I guess a little bit of context here. So I think that recovery and therapy is one of the most important things to try to do marathon training. I think if you can't take care of your body, there's no chance that you're going to be able to endure the just load and volume and intensity of training. So you got to put a huge priority on recovery. So I work with a few professionals in terms of my recovery. And that is Natalie from True Health in Waterloo, who does my weekly massages, just works on my body, pretty much, she knows what I'm trying to do. We understand each other. I get on the table and she tells me what we need and we just get through it. Sarah Mariano, just, inspiration, great friend, absolute phenom when it comes to recovery, and has been working with me almost my entire, athletic career. And whenever there is something that I really, really need, like the best of the best, she's just always there to take care of me and make sure my body's working great. So I'm really fortunate to be able to work with her. And then Mark St. Pierre, who takes care of all my blood work. So a lot of you will know that I'm pretty adamant about getting blood work done every quarter. I think that we live in a world where you have the data on every aspect of your life, yet we don't take a look at our human juice, like our blood, that could literally tell us everything there is to know about our health. And it's fairly accessible. So I like working with Mark St. Pierre to get my blood work done, to figure out what's working, what's not working, what's out of balance, what's in balance, and then adjust my diet and nutrition accordingly. And then the University of Waterloo, we went crazy with this, but Boston's no joke. Trying to run a 2-hour and 55-minute marathon, it's actually got to be faster than that, is serious. And there's a big difference between 2 hours and 18 minutes and 3 hours. Just like there's a huge difference between 3 hours and 2 hours and 55 minutes. So I really feel like I got to be dialed in with everything. So those are the organizations and the people that I'm working with to kind of get me there. Ironically, this kind of leads into how I put my training together. I haven't worked with anybody for my training blocks yet. And I think that the habits and the knowledge that I have currently will get me to like a 3:10, a 3 hour and 10-minute marathon. I think I can do myself. I think I can jimmy rig my own workout and running plan to get me to a 3 hour and 10-minute marathon. And I say that because I've already kind of figured out how to work through my heart rates and what's important. I've already figured out the importance of, threshold and high intensity workouts. I haven't even done a 12-week block yet, like a real actual 12-week intense block. I haven't incorporated fartlek training. I haven't incorporated track worker intervals. I haven't incorporated like what you would consider a tempo run. And I'm still getting these improvements. So I think that just by incorporating some of that stuff, just from the videos and the YouTube stuff that I've watched, I could probably get down to a 3:10. I think once I get down to a 3:10, that's what I'm going to need to start looking at the next level. Maybe obviously a run coach, maybe start looking at some super shoes. I don't know. I will have to find out when I get there. But right now, I think with what I know, my current knowledge, my current habits, I think I can get down to a 3:10. So that's that. And look, like the reality is this, this is something that I get to kind of just pour myself into. Work is always the biggest priority in my life. It always will be. And I think during the time when I was at True Local, I let a lot of people try to, tell me that, you work too much and tell me that work isn't everything. And I always thought that once I was done with True Local, then maybe I should start listening to what they said. And I realized that that's absolutely not the case at all. I love to work. Work is who I am. It's my battlefield, right? It's where I get to showcase what I'm good at. It's where I get to be a gladiator. So work takes up a disproportionate amount of my life. I'm able to take some of what makes me good at work and now pour it into something that also makes me happy, which is running. So I'm having a lot of fun doing this. And I think it's one of the things that allows me to be the most natural when I talk about this stuff. Anytime I talk about business, you are always on. No matter what anybody thinks, you're always on, because you know that everybody's going to dissect what you say. You know that what you say can affect everything from who wants to work with you to who's going to invest in you to who are going to be your business partners to everything. So you are always on, and you have to speak a certain way and watch kind of, what topics you're talking about, and you got to act in just a whole different manner. I realize that I'm kind of most natural when I'm talking about either sports car racing or running, and I really enjoy it, and I get to do this type of stuff. So I'm going to keep doing this just for my own sort of knowledge, but also we're going to get better at it, I think is the reality. My goal is to do all these unedited. So it's really just access to me. I can just talk and be myself, and we're not looking to do any, like, if I say something wrong or anything like that. Like, I just want to have conversations. And I think the idea is we're going to get better and better and better and better. And I think that eventually we'll get to a point where there is like some real valuable content that we can put out there outside of just, me kind of talking about my experiences. But that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So a couple quick little things that I just want to shout out is that I really do think that the best thing about running a marathon, honest to God, like if we're not talking about like this big theoretical or philosophical stuff, the best thing about running a marathon is just that you have the ultimate permission. You have life's permission to just be lazy as shit after. When you are finished a marathon, you know, for those people who are high performers type A, you know that no matter what you do in a day, you always feel like you could do a little bit more. You always feel like you could send off that other email or tweak that design or test that product, or there's always an endless supply of things that you could do. And no matter what you get done in a day, you just feel like you could do more. So far for me personally, the only time I have ever felt this sort of weightlessness of just, wow, I did what I needed to do today and there is nothing else that I need to do, I can just enjoy the day, was the day the company sold, to be honest. And I try to find that feeling a lot, and I talk about it a lot in my book, where you have to find victories in the small wins. So I think the marathon was the unlikely catalyst for me getting that weightless feeling. And running a marathon, you just have the ultimate permission to eat whatever you want, chill, relax. If you want to take a nap, take a nap. If you don't watch TV, watch TV. Who cares? But you just absolutely get to feel good about yourself. You have the utmost pride. You have accomplished what you needed to get done. So the fitness part of running a marathon is fun. I love it. You know, the challenge is fun. I love it. But I think that the reward that you get from accomplishing the thing that you wanted to do in that day and having it be such a mental and physical thing, you just get this like beautiful cocktail of weightlessness for the rest of the day. So I love doing that. Anyway, I did want to end on a quote, actually, because I do love seeing this when people do these things. But there's a quote. I think there are two places that I found this. I think when I looked it up online, it said the Navy SEALs. I didn't hear it from the Navy SEALs. Actually, I heard it from the movie White Men Can't Jump, the remake, Jack Harlow's character. But I love it. So it says, under pressure, we don't rise to the occasion. We sink to the level of our training. And I think that's got to be one of the greatest metaphors for life. So keep that in mind. Under pressure, we don't rise to the occasion. We sink to the level of our training. And I think you can take away from that what you will. So that's it. That's a wrap. Up next, actually, I have a 50K trail run that is part of the UTMB series. And it's called the 50K UTMB Canyons Ultra Trail Race. That's in April in California. So I'm going to start training for that. I don't necessarily know what that's going to look like, but it's like 8 weeks away. So we got some work to do. But that's a wrap. And I'm excited for my next adventure or next thing that I'm excited about to do another one of these videos.